All right, what is up, everybody? It is time for another episode of the Chasing Waypoints podcast, and this time around, we are talking to Adam from Speed Deluxe Vintage Adventures. So, heard from him a couple of weeks ago, was interested in coming on the podcast, and as soon as I checked out the Instagram profile, I was like, oh yeah, we need to definitely talk about this one. So, I'm not going to give away too much about what he does or what they do as a group. We're going to find out here a little bit more in just a minute. Have you guys been keeping track of some of the players that are out in the rally world? You might have seen Skylar Houses in Saudi Arabia. It looks like he was on the BAS Dakar bike once again, having some fun out there. Also got another guest coming up too, Jacob Argubite, out there in Glamis today. This is Saturday, March 20th. He's out in Glamis right now. Mason Klein getting lost in the desert, finding some waypoints, chasing him down, as you will, no pun intended. So, a lot of stuff going on. Baja Rally coming up, Sonora Rally coming up first. Going to be a lot of fun, a lot of stuff going down, a lot more schools training. If you guys didn't catch the episode last week, we did have an episode and spoke with Alex Martins of Rally Pan Am and Conflict Motorsports. Definitely want to check out that episode if you have not done so already. You want to back that up and figure it out, learn some suspension stuff. A lot of cool stuff for the 790, 890 Adventure, and pretty much any other dirt bike, and a lot of cool stuff in his story and how Conflict became the household name that it is now for adventure suspension. So let's get that link over to Adam now. See if we can get him on the podcast here in just a second. Kill some of that music. Yeah. But yeah, definitely looking forward to it. It's going to be really, really fun. We're finally starting to see some open borders. We're starting to see some stuff going down and more events popping up. So people doing some riding. I live out in the sticks here in San Diego, and I am seeing more and more motorcycles heading south. Hopefully they are still abiding by their social distancing stuff and making sure that they are being safe. Last thing we want is to cause more trouble down there. So lots of fun, but yeah, let's find out. We got that like on Instagram, just waiting for him to jump on. Just a second. But yeah, so I'm excited. I am flying out to Texas here in a couple weeks. Gonna go finally get to see the Conflict Motorsports shop, see what that is all about, learn some suspension stuff, because there's a lot of black magic that goes on in there. That's why we pay people like Alex Martins to do our suspension. So cannot wait. Super excited. KTM 790 Adventure. I didn't get the 890. So many people sold their bikes that I saw and jumped to an 890. I don't know. It was kind of interesting that Quinn Cody was testing an 890 all along and smoking everybody in the hair scrambles. If you've ever seen something so interesting, watching an 890 smoke every 450 on the field. But all right. Anyway, so let's get to the show. Looks like Adam is now on and connected. Adam, are you there?
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah.
Hey, yeah, I can hear you. What's up, bud?
Good. Doing good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It is Saturday, and it's kind of sunny in San Diego.
Yeah, it's actually a beautiful day here in Chattanooga. So 65 degrees, sun's out. It's awesome.
Yeah, sounds horrible.
Sounds like San Diego.
I know, right? Yeah, except just on the other side of the states. So
yeah,
dude, we talked a couple weeks ago, like, hey, you were interested in jumping on the podcast and talking a little bit about it, but like, I'm on the website right now and I'm just checking out the stuff that you guys do, and you know, with the Vintage 1000, I just saw there's Vintage 500. There's some stuff going. So what's going on with it? How did this get started? What's it about?
So it kind of started it started in 2015, and some friends and I were at a vintage motocross race, and all day, and we came back and hit a restaurant on the way back, and we were all chatting, and one of the guys mentioned some guys, I think out west, that did something called, I think it's called the 555. I think I've got this totally wrong, and it was like 500 miles, $500 bikes, and something else. Maybe, I don't think it was 5 days, but it was, the basic principle was they got some bikes and did a trip on it. And I just really got back into riding dirt bikes. I kind of rode off-road a little bit when I was a kid, and was just getting back into it on a vintage Triumph, and kind of really wanted to do some kind of trip on it. And that conversation got me thinking about doing a trip. And, you know, I didn't really want to do it on my own. And my wife, who has been riding for 20 years, didn't want to do it. And I knew the friend that I was speaking to at the restaurant, Chastain, I knew he would be down for it. Whatever I kind of was like, hey, let's do this. He'd be like, yeah, okay. And so I was sat at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning in April 2015, and wrote on a piece of paper, Vintage 1000. And in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, what would I want this to look like? And, you know, I'm writing on the same sheet of paper, motorcycles must be manufactured before 1980, be 1,000 miles, as much off-road as possible. And I think at the point, I'd also put that bikes would be under $1,000.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and I think there was something else, but that was the basic premise of it. And I just took a photograph of it and put it on Instagram. And I put "who's in" at the bottom in big letters, and put it on Instagram, and it was out there. I was like, you know, I've been thinking about this. I'm just going to throw it out there. Let's do it. And I really had no idea what I was getting myself into at that point. And even just mapping 1,000 miles, I mean, I had no experience at all. The only time I'd ever seen a roll chart or a road book was either on a Dakar bike or on they have a local bike show here in Chattanooga every Friday night. They shut down a block of town, and an old guy I know who's been riding since the 60s was down there with an OSA enduro bike that he'd restored, and he had the original road chart holder that he'd made with a clock in it and everything from the 70s.
Oh, wow.
So I was talking to him about this, and I was like, oh man, what a great idea. That would be great to navigate using that. I want it to be a period correct trip. So, and I'm like, well, how do I do this? You know? And the first year we actually, so I started researching things. Where could we go? What could we do? I found the Trans-America Trail, which I'd never heard of. And Sam, the guy who organised the did the initial route for the Trans-America Trail. He's in Mississippi, just a couple of states away. So I called him and told him what I was trying to do. And he said, well, I've got a couple of loops in the Mississippi area, and you could use the Trans-America Trail, which literally runs 20 miles away from my back door. You could use the Trans-America Trail to get to it, do the loop, and then ride back. It'd be about 1,000 miles. I was like, well, okay, that'll be a good first event. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did. I bought the maps off Sam, because he has the roll charts, bought the roll charts off him for everybody that did it. We ended up with 7 of us ride the first Vintage 1000. Okay. About 50% I knew, and others were friends of friends, or just, I mean, one guy heard about it on the Sideburn magazine blog, and he was from Australia, and he was over here on vacation with his wife, and he left his wife in Portland and flew to Chattanooga. I lent him a bike, and he rode the ride. And,
honey, I'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, awesome guy. So that's how it started, and that, to give you a bit of idea how it went. So we left I think we did it on a Tuesday through Saturday. And I picked Mark, the Australian guy. I picked him up from the airport on Saturday or Sunday. and he came, and I had a Suzuki DS 350, I think, a kind of enduro bike, mid-70s, that he was going to ride. Originally, I was going to ride it because my Triumph, the top end had blown on it, and I was like, oh, I'll ride that Suzuki instead. I just picked it up for like $400. It'll work. And so I gave him the Suzuki, and I've been waiting. My Triumph top end's completely off it. Been waiting on piston rings for it. They kept arriving. They kept being broken. And so they turned up on Saturday afternoon, rebuilt the top end. No, they turned up on, sorry. Yeah, we did leave on Tuesday. They turned up on Monday afternoon. I rebuilt the top end of the Triumph that afternoon, put the bike back together, rode it around the parking lot, and was like, okay, we're good. And then
it'll break in on the way, no worries.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So
nothing could go wrong here.
Like the other idea around the event was that, and still is that you have to carry everything on your bike. So we camp out every night, and you have to carry your tent, your sleeping bag, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to carry food, but if you need some spare parts or tools, you have to carry all that stuff. So, and then the first year we had my wife Jamie and Chasten's wife Lauren rode in a pickup truck, and then kind of followed behind us just in case something went wrong. Which it did, of course. And so we, the Tuesday comes, like, nobody's had a great deal of sleep, but we were all feeling good about it. Chasten and Lauren had arrived on Sunday evening, and it was all good. So on Tuesday morning, everybody arrived at my shop, which was where we were leaving from. And so, like I say, there were 7 of us, and we all left. So we get to the shop, one guy's missing, and call him up. I know the guy, and I call him up, and he's like, just had some trouble, just kind of broke down on the way to the shop, had to come back, try and fix the bike. So we're like, all right, well, we'll wait. So this is, before we've even started, one guy's broken down. Yeah. You can probably tell where this is going, but we waited, and it was pouring down with rain. I mean, like lashing down, really bad. And like, oh, we'll just wait. We'll wait for, we'll wait till like 10:30. Anyway, we get to that point, still hasn't got it sorted. So like, okay, we'll have to leave, try and meet us en route. You can catch us up. We'll be taking back roads and stuff. So that's what we do. So we leave in absolute downpour, and 8 miles in, there was a guy on a Suzuki 2-stroke 125, and 8 miles in, his transmission literally exploded. I think, like second gear, I don't know how that Suzuki has got like 14 horsepower, if that. And he stripped almost every tooth off second gear. I have no idea how he even did it. Talent. Yeah, there's a skill, and so that's kind of how it went. Finally the rain kind of dried up, and the first day we got going, and Sam's route, the Trans-America Trail, is very turn heavy. So like the road, we use the 3.5-inch wide roll chart holders, and they've just got a tulip diagram on them, and a turn left onto Francis Street or something like that. And so we use those. And the Trans-America Trail, generally speaking, you can only get half a day into one of those. So they're pretty turn heavy, and none of us have ever run off a roll chart either. So the initial idea, I think, when I thought about the event, was that we'd all just go and be on our own or ride in pairs or whatever you felt comfortable with. If you were faster, you could go off, and it was not meant to be a race, but there's always a competition element in everything anybody does, right? So,
correct. Get a bunch of bikes together, yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of bikes and a bunch of guys or girls or whatever. You just, there's going to be somebody who wants to be in camp first. Well, the first day was just such a mess. I mean, it didn't end at that 8 miles. It was, Nathan on a 2-stroke again, 250 Kawasaki, there was one point where he couldn't get from one end of the road to the other without the ignition crapping out on it. We wanted this. The spirit was, and the spirit still is, that we want everybody to finish the day, and everybody to finish the 1,000 miles. Mm-hmm. So we just kept we'd fix it, get back on the road, just brake again. Eventually, he gets on the trailer. Long story short, we arrive in camp that night at about 10:30, I think it was.
Right.
And then, so that's with 5 bikes out of the 7. The next day, everything's going okay. We stumble. We're going along. We've just gassed up, and we come through this small area, and there's a house on the right, and there's a bridge, like a concrete culvert, that's been under construction. Mm-hmm. And it's not a very big creek to go through. And there's 2 guys there on bikes. There's a guy on a BMW GS, like the big one, and KTM. I don't know what KTM was. Again, it was a big one, probably the biggest they did at the time. And all the gear on, and we're there on these ratty old bikes. All of them, apart from one, was under $1,000. That meant buying it and getting it ready. So we're all there, jeans and t-shirt, just whatever. And the guy in the BMW is walking back, and he's just shaking his head like he can't get through it. And I'm like, we'd probably get through this. So I'm leading us, and I go up to this culvert, and where it breaks off, I just kind of hop off the end of it into the creek, drive through the creek. I'm like, no big deal, and everybody follows me. And there's me, Mark, the Australian guy, and Chastin are the first 3. And I just get through the creek, and I look back, and it's probably 20 feet wide or something. I look back, and Chastin's bike is on fire.
Uh-oh.
And he's the only person on the planet probably that's ever had his bike catch fire in a water crossing. And it's licking. It's like the back end of it's on fire, and the flames are above his helmet.
Oh.
And I'm like, get off the bike. And he's like, what? And Mark's next to him, go, get off the bike. Anyway, we get off the creek. He finally realizes what's going on, throws the bike down. It's engulfed by that point. I think he grabbed his wallet and something out of his tank bag, and that was it. The whole thing went up. And then, his wife Lauren is in the truck with Jamie, and we just kind of stood there in disbelief. Mm-hmm. At this point. I mean, it's like, what? We're on day 2. We're essentially 2 bikes down already, and one bike's just caught fire and literally burnt to nothing. Of course, we've got no signal. We're in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi, I think, and this house is on up on the hill next to us, and these guys, are behind us with the KTM and the BMW. God knows what these guys are thinking. And so Chastin goes up to the house, makes a phone call, and says to Lauren, can you meet us at the end of this road? It was a dirt road we were on, and we'll meet you at the main road. So we do. He didn't want to tell her what had happened. And, he got on the back of Mark's bike, and we rode out, and they finally catch up. And she's looking around. She's like, where's the bike? And he's like, it burned up, and it was actually a grandpa's bike. And it wasn't too sentimental to him, I don't think, but still, it was like a grandpa's Honda CB 500. Mm-hmm. And she was like, no, really, what happened? And he was like, no, it burnt to the ground. And it's just like, oh man. So anyway, we carried on. The bikes are left to carry on. They went and picked up the bike, and he still got it. It's hanging from the rafters in his barn. But the week kind of continued on like that. Bikes would get fixed, like Nathan's Kawasaki. They fixed it. He got back on the road for a bit. I think it broke again. The guy whose transmission broke, he was sharing a bike with his friend who'd come on the trip, Ryan, who I'd never met before the trip. And so they alternated days on the bike. Okay. And stuff. So the week went out. We didn't complete the full route in the end, for obvious reasons. But the middle day, or the second to last day, Mark from Australia and myself were the only people on the road. for 2/3 of it. And that day we actually beat the support truck back to camp. So with two of us, it really worked. But the rest of the time it didn't. And, that first night I remember laying in the tent and turning to Jamie and being like, what have I done? This has got to be the stupidest idea I've ever had. But it was a great week. And my bike, actually, we got caught in a thunderstorm about 50 miles from Chattanooga on the way home. And the oil line somehow got torn on the bottom of the engine, and it seized the engine. 50 miles from home, and I'd done like 850 miles on a bike that I'd rebuilt the day before. And so it's kind of sad, but the rest of the guys, we all rode in. So I got on the back of the Suzuki that I'd lent to Mark, and the other guys, everybody twoed up on a bike, and we rode into Chattanooga in the pouring rain to finish off this trip. And, we get back, and it was a good week, but it was super stressful, and, still a good time, and made some lifelong friends out of it for sure. But I kind of thought, well, that's probably that,
One and done.
And then, one and done. And then we get back, and, there'd been a few pictures put up on Instagram throughout the week, and I'd never checked it, never had time, because we were on the road at least 12 hours a day, and with breakdowns and all that kind of stuff. And when we got back, there's like people going pretty kind of nuts about it. Probably just because of everything that went on, and there's a ton of interest in it. So I'm like, well, maybe if we're more organized, it'll be better next year, so we did it again the next year, and it was better. And there was 12 of us, I think. And I broke down 30 miles from home that year.
Making progress.
Exactly. So, each year only one person, Mark, the guy from Australia, was the only person to do all the miles the first year. And then the second year, I think there was two guys. And it's got better since then. But so it's a bit long-winded answer, Victor. But that's how it started. That first year was just me throwing something down on Instagram and being like, let's do it.
Nice.
And we did. But yeah.
Well, sometimes keeping it simple works a little better.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's it's a really neat concept, because the whole vintage bike thing, I see that we have a follower in common, is a friend of mine, Ing, who I met through Baja Rally. And he's a really talented photographer, but he's into a lot of vintage stuff. And I'm thinking, he's got his 100 GS, the Dakar, but I don't know that he would do that. But I don't know. Maybe we'll call him out on that. But it's nice to see, the vintage bikes making around. How the first thing that comes to mind is, can you still get the vintage bikes? Is it difficult to get vintage bikes, for people that want to come out and do this?
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that we ride a lot of Forest Service roads and stuff like that. It's at most it's twin track, and this year, 2020, we managed to squeak in a couple of events. With COVID, just being super cautious and took every prevention going, and everybody wore a mask and all that kind of stuff. But last year, I did throw in some more difficult stuff just to test people, because people were getting more prepared and they were on better bikes. But the beauty of it is you can buy a road-going vintage bike, a Honda CB 350, for example, which was designed for the road, throw some knobby tires on it, and it's pretty much good enough. Is it as comfortable as a Yamaha XT500, which is essentially the first enduro bike ever made? No, of course it isn't. But it'll get the job done, and there's loads. They made a gazillion of those bikes. So the most, and it's funny because since we started doing it in 2015, you could, like I say, we were all under $1,000. You could buy bikes relatively cheap then. It was kind of in the middle of the cafe racer era, which definitely bumped the prices of vintage bikes up. But you can still buy a bike pretty cheap, and you still can, even for an XT500, which is one of the more popular bikes, or an XL Honda 500, you're $2,500.
Okay.
For a really good one. And there's guys that do it a lot cheaper, but yeah, so they're around. And vintage enduro stuff seems to have got more popular because the prices have definitely gone up on that stuff. And I know there's a multitude of people that come on our rides every year that don't have a vintage bike when they sign up, and they go and buy one for it.
I don't care what I'm riding. I'm doing this.
Yeah, it's like I'll do it. I'll find something, and it's and even some people sign up with one bike and they upgrade or whatever, But yeah, it's like every year we get at least a few people that have never even ridden a vintage bike, and they're like, I just want to get involved in this. It looks like a really good time, and they just go out and buy something. So yeah, it's definitely accessible, I feel like, anyway. And reasonably priced. I mean, you don't have to have all the gear. You have to have something, you have to have something to carry your luggage with, and that's about it. A roll chart holder is $30. It's super easy to get into.
Yeah. Well, and it's super basic. I mean, we compare it to the rally bikes of now, or you think, or just even anything. Like if you were going to do the same ride on a newer bike, all of the equipment and all that stuff, the prices start jumping exponentially. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then it seems like have you noticed that like they, you look for a particular bike and that's vintage wise, and then a few months later it seems like everybody else discovered that bike and it's bumping the price up. Have you been noticing that as well? It seems like the CB500 was like that, I think, with the whole cafe racer thing.
Yeah, totally. Those, I mean, yeah, the CB range for the cafe racer deal is the best looking frame. I guess a little bit of my background is I run a vintage bike shop and I build custom bikes as well and stuff. So nice. I've built a ton of cafe racers and all that stuff. And there's a better looking frame, which then bumps the price up and all that kind of stuff. Hondas are, of course, famed for their reliability, with good reason. And, so, like I say, I've mentioned the XT500 a couple of times, but you could buy one of those for $1,000, a good one, 5 years ago, and now they're $25, and maybe a bit more. And, I kind of wonder what does drive that up, in all honesty, because they're not a very good bike to do a hair scramble on or a vintage motocross event. I guess like the vintage motocross maybe a little bit, but because they're quite a big bike, and you don't need 500 cc's for most of those things. But yeah, I kind of wonder sometimes, and maybe people see our thing going on and like, oh, that's cool, maybe I'll get into it, and or maybe it's just the next thing on the collector's list. The guys that used to ride those things back in the 70s when they were 15, 16, and now they want one again. That seems to be the trend with vintage and antique bike is, I just delivered a Honda to a customer yesterday, a little XL 185 that was his. He bought when he was like 8 or 9 years old, I think, and has had it all this time. And it's been like I think his brother had it, then maybe a cousin took it apart, and I just resurrected it for him, and it's just a bit of nostalgia. So I think nostalgia drives the price as much as anything. And I think, and when I was a kid and we were riding bikes, we were riding street bikes down green lanes in England. Just, I lived in the middle in a tiny village in England, and we could ride down the road to green lanes when we were, 10, 11, 12. There was nobody around, and we just go and ride whatever we had, usually two-stroke street bikes, 50 cc's, 100 cc's, whatever. So, I think it's just a bit of nostalgia that pushes the price up more than anything. And, I think our event has pushed certainly the popularity of it a little bit.
Nice.
So, but yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah, that definitely, like, it's cool to see I've always enjoyed the cafe racer, you know, look on bikes, but the scrambler, like when BMW came out with the Urban GS, the new, you know, their new version. You know, all of those bikes is just so awesome, and it's cool. Now it seems like, well, I don't know that I would pay all that money to take it and beat it up like that. But, you know, like you're saying, it was one of those 500s. Throw a little bit of money at it, a little roll chart holder. You don't have to get into the fancy electronics or anything like that, and just make sure it's solid. It sounds like it'll be a winner.
Yeah, you know, mechanically, most of those bikes are super simple. You know, as long as the wiring's good and ignition and stuff like that, you know, usually they don't break mechanically. But yeah, it's like you say, that some of the modern stuff, that especially the BMW and the Triumph Scrambler and stuff, I mean, they're great looking bikes, but one, they're heavy. I mean, and two, they're expensive, you know. I mean, both of those bikes are probably 12, 13, maybe even more $1,000. So, like you say, it kind of reluctant to
just go send it.
yeah, you know, I mean, exactly. I mean, honestly, I'd do it, but and I'd kind of love to do. I think that's where the challenge is for me. It's like I'd love to get one of those bikes and just like take it to Baja and run the 1000 or something, just because. You know, I think to me, I always look back, and one of the reasons I love vintage bikes is that I think that they are a bit of a challenge, and you know, people think, you know, we meet a lot of people along the way on this thing. They're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Because we travel in groups of 5, and they're like, "Oh, what's going on?" And you tell them, and they're like, they look at you like, "Are you kind of not all there?" You know. You know, and like I say, it's kind of the standard of bike has gone up, but still, when people look at it, it's kind of a ragtag crew of guys and girls that they just like, it doesn't make sense. Some people are like, "Oh man, how do I get information on this?" And other people are like, "That's stupid." You know, but it's like, well, what do you think they rode in the 60s? They rode exactly what I'm riding right now. Like, I ride a 66 Triumph 650, and you know, it was a street bike, and it's a little bit more modified now, but essentially, like even last year, it was a stock suspension Triumph, like 4 inches of travel. And you know, I've raced motocross on that and all sorts of stuff, and it's, you know, we've done the LA Barstow Vegas and all that kind of stuff, and it's harder, but you know, at times it's more rewarding. But it is definitely fun to get on a modern bike and do some stuff as well. But
it's like people, like you said, you know, people look at you. Growing up racing Baja, it was always the same thing. In the Class 11 Baja bugs, you know, just stock Baja bugs, and you're like, how do they even? Why would you even? Okay, they must be crazy. So
it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Why would you sign up for this? Why would you put yourself through that? Because I mean, that's the other thing too. I mean, most modern bikes, you can get them up 75, 80 fairly quickly and sustainably, but I feel like these bikes, the speeds were slower back when they were around. So I don't know that they're in a hurry, and then horsepower is just not there, even if it is a 500cc bike, you know?
Yeah, but, you know, I think anybody would get on some of those bikes and go, "Oh, this got a decent amount of power." But then you get on like a Husky 701 or something like that, and you're like, "Oh,
no, this doesn't have power."
Okay, yeah, this is different, you know. But
nice.
Cool.
So I see now. So this started in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah,
that was the first one. But then I'm looking on the website here, and you guys are doing one out of Flagstaff as well.
Yeah. So for the first few years, we just did. For the first couple of years, we went west. We went into Mississippi and Tennessee and back round, and we used Sam's TAT route for both of those, because after the first year we didn't really do it all. So I was like, well, let's try and do it next year. So we did that. And then after that, I was like, no, I want to make my own route. So then I developed the whole route on my own and did the roll chart and all that kind of stuff. Nice. And then, so then we ride east, like Georgia, North Georgia, North Carolina and Tennessee. I mean, it's amazing riding. So we did that, and then it got to the point where, and we limited the numbers to around 20 people, just to manage it, you know. And it's gotten to the point a couple of years ago where we were selling it out really quick. And I said to my wife, Jamie, I was like, maybe we should do another one, you know, kind of in the spring or something. So we went down to Florida and back. We went down to the Gulf Coast and back in 2019. And then last year we were going to do the same kind of thing again, but because COVID had just hit and we didn't know anything about it at all, we cancelled it. And then I really wanted to do this ride out west. And if you look at and I kind of hate to say this, but if you look at the statistics from social media, a lot of interest in the ride comes from out west. And so I wanted to do a ride out west for that reason. I mean, even if it was just to give people the opportunity to do it. And also, I wanted to do it. You know, the whole reason I even started this ride was because I wanted to do it. And so I'd love to do something in every state where it's worth it eventually. You know what I mean? So I've wanted to ride in Arizona for a long time. I was like, all right, we're going to do Arizona. Maybe we dip into New Mexico, but ended up the route I developed was just in Arizona. And 2 weeks ago, national parks in Arizona closed a few of our campgrounds until June 1st, and the ride's in at the end of May. So we're actually going to Utah.
Okay.
So I quickly, over a week, developed a rough route, enough to know I'd work, book some campgrounds and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to Utah in May. And unfortunately, a couple of people couldn't make it, but we filled their spots, and they'll probably join us next year. We'll do Arizona when everything's opened up a little bit more. But yeah, it was really just an expansion of the ride, because I wanted to keep heading out west, but people also love riding in the North Carolina mountains. You know, and we get quite a few return riders, but also new people. It's such a picturesque area, and the riding is just fantastic. So I would hate to go away from that area. So we're kind of trying to do one locally to us in the southeast, and then one somewhere else in the country. You know, obviously logistically for us, that is a bit of a headache, but I feel like it's worth it. You know, I want to ride in those places, and I want to ride vintage bikes in those places, so we're just kind of making it work.
Yeah. Well, and I've if you've been to Overland Expo, that was my first experience in Flagstaff. And like you said, I mean, it's like super picturesque. Like, we had some recommendations and went out into the hills and checked some of the stuff out. And some of those dirt roads out there, I mean, yeah, I'm on a vintage bike, you know, no problem. I mean, I did it in a standard SUV, nothing fancy. And
yeah,
it's just so much to see. And then, I mean, it is also like out west. This is like off-road and all of that stuff. I mean, there are bikes everywhere that do that kind of stuff. So I'm not too surprised to hear that there's like a lot of interest on this side, but I'm absolutely stoked that you're doing something like that out here. Now I'm thinking like, okay, as soon as this is over, I'm heading to Craigslist. So just like last week, just like last week's podcast, this one just turned expensive too.
Yeah, it's kind of infectious. I love it. Like, we'd love to have you on the ride as well.
Yeah, no, and you know, it's like you said, it's like the bikes are so simple. Now, honestly, like, I mean, I have my 790, and I am depending on that thing to stay together out in the middle of nowhere, because I know nothing of the computers and the fuel injection systems and stuff. Like, I know enough to get by. I'm dangerous. I'm sure I could ruin some parts. But on these older bikes, it's like, it's cool because it's just, you know, Does it got spark? Does it have fuel? Does it have air? Okay. What's the problem?
Yeah. Why isn't it running?
Why isn't it running?
It's got all those sweet things, but it still isn't running.
Yeah. The motor still spins freely. It's not
what's
stuck.
going on? Yeah, totally. I mean, they are, and so the way we run it as well, and this happens every year. Again, is that there's people that turn up, and last year, I'll give you one example. I won't name him, but he started riding because of COVID. He was off work and worked overseas, came back, and just decided, I'm going to buy an old motorcycle and fix it up, and never ridden, never done anything. So this is 3 months before the ride. Somehow, I don't even know how, hears about the ride, emails us, hey, can I come? I was like, yeah, of course you can. And so he turns up at our house, stays at our house the night before, and great guy. His riding experience is 3 months, mainly on the road. And yeah, oh man, he did great. And had a Honda CL350, which is pretty decent, and he'd taken notice of everything we told him to do with regards to packing and all that kind of stuff, and because that's a major issue. And had a great week, and he had a couple of falls, not gonna lie to you, and his bike broke a fair few times, but we always fixed it. And the last day that thing was, the last afternoon I'd wired it, so to stop it, you basically ground the wire to the handlebars.
Yes. Oh, I remember that.
But then it started raining. It started kind of electrocuting him a little bit.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
it's just 12 volts.
What it is. It's just another story. Yeah. And but just an example, though, he had no mechanical experience at all, and when his bike broke, he really, he kind of had a rough idea what it might be, but most of the time it wasn't that, because it could be something else. Most of the time when something stops, it could be, like you said, it could be three things. Mm-hmm. But the way so you get, I don't know if it's 50-50 or not, but it's probably close. You get people that know what they're doing and people that have no idea. Mm-hmm. And maybe they've ridden for 20 years, but they still don't know how to fix a bike, and that's just the way it is. That's what keeps me in business day to day. But there's other riders on the ride that do know what they're doing, and as soon as somebody breaks down, honestly, it's a race to see who gets their tools out first. It's amazing. The people that come on this ride are just fantastic, and it's the real reason we do it every year. It's what makes the ride for me. It's just people's attitude is just amazing, and everybody wants everybody to succeed, and they'll do whatever they can. And it's great to see. And if nobody can fix it, I always run with the last group that's on the roll chart. I'll leave camp last to get in last, and if another group passes another, I'll stop with that group, and usually I can fix it. So that's the way we run it. And if it can't be fixed, we have a support vehicle that follows roughly close to the trail, or close enough to come in and grab you if they need to. And more often than not, we'll be able to fix it at camp with something that they can pick up on the road parts wise, or maybe we just need a couple of hours to fix it, which you really don't have on the trail, because with everything that's going on, breakages and all that kind of stuff, an average day is probably 10 hours in the saddle. So we try, and if it's going to take more than an hour to fix it, we try and get into camp. But if it's going to take like an hour and 20, we'll still probably do it, to be honest. But yeah, just getting back to it, you don't need, like, if you don't know how a bike works at all, and you've only ever ridden modern bikes, and you want to pick up a old bike, and you can spend $2,000-$3,000 and get a really nice bike, it probably will have some kind of issue on this ride, but somebody will fix it for you.
Yeah.
And it won't be an issue.
Yeah. And that's kind of cool to see, because I see that in rally in general. It's yes, it's competitive, and yeah, they're keeping time, but everybody's up for helping everybody, or at least checking in on them and making sure that they're okay or whatever, so quick parts and stuff like that. So it's kind of a whole different thing. Like, I don't think if you're not in the motorcycle culture of riding and hanging out with the guys or gals or whatever it is, in groups.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll understand that, that kind of thing. It's like it's like how everybody waves, at each other on a motorcycle. Yeah. Except some of the Harley guys. Some of the Harley guys are too cool for school. They don't want to.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little very quick story. But I've got a couple of friends that ride. I met one of them. Really, one of them is a friend, and the other one's a friend of a friend kind of thing. But we're acquaintances. But we met because of Triumphs. He had a Triumph that his dad owned. Well, I think he bought it brand new, and he finally got it about 7 or 8 years ago. And we met because of that. I was riding Triumphs, he was riding Triumphs, and then we started riding dirt together and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they'll go past Harley guys and do like a proper full-on, not like the bro wave thing. They'll do a proper full-on wave, like super enthusiastic, like hand in the air, like just. And it's so hilarious. But you know what? Harley guys will just wave the same way back. It's so good. It's so good. It cracks me up every time I see them do it. But they just do it on purpose because otherwise, like, they're just completely ignored. But it's super funny. But and I used to ride Harleys as well. So like, in fact, my wife still got one. I don't have one anymore. But and I wouldn't rule one out again, but I'm not certainly. It's a different culture, and I think the dual sport culture in overall is amazing. To be honest,
it is.
It really is. You stop on the trail, and if you see somebody, you stop and have a chat or whatever, and it's totally different. And it's what I mean. I did one dedicated road ride last year. Mm-hmm. And that was it. I just, I think after riding dual sport and off-road and stuff, it's just not that interesting to me anymore. But it's just the culture thing as well. It's just, I mean, you'll know with that, the 790, I mean, you can ride on the highway or wherever with that thing, right? So you can, you drive past a dirt road, you're like, oh, what's down there? You just go and have a look. I mean, perfect.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It was when I started working at San Diego BMW Motorcycles over here, and I had seen it, and I had fallen into that groove of like, oh yeah, look, here's another guy on a GS on his way to Starbucks in full armor, and then once you start working there, and what you do, you're in the motorcycle industry, you work on vintage bikes, you start meeting more people, and you start realizing how big and how different the culture is. With it, and particularly in adventure riders, you could be out in the middle of nowhere. We've done a couple of rides in Baja where that happens. Usually we're riding the typical power sports schedule, right? Sunday, Mondays, and so there's nobody out there Monday, and all of a sudden you run across somebody, and it's like you're talking to them like you've known them forever, and where they came from, and finding all of this stuff. So. Yeah, I think, like we kind of mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people that aren't into motorcycles and into that wouldn't realize how big of a culture and how big of a, I don't want to use the word cult because then that gets classified as something else. But it's got this like following and this camaraderie between people. And so doing events like this, I mean, this is like everybody should be signing up to do something like this, because it's old school and it's cool and it's not complicated, in a time where everything is complicated.
Yeah, it's just fun, and especially, you can look at the world and think, oh God, it's just doom and gloom, especially if you watch the news or read the news. But, the thing for motorcycles for me, full stop, is just they are fun, and riding them is fun. And, most of the people you meet that ride them or whatever, you can have a good chat, and you've got that in common at least. And the feeling of riding, I lived in Australia for a while and surfed a lot there. And, there's a phrase, only a surfer knows the feeling. And I liken it to riding motorcycles. It's almost the same. It's just, you're in your own headspace and just fantastic. And everybody knows what that feels like who rides a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Even if they rode one 30 years ago and stopped because they had a family or blah, 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 they still remember it.
Yeah.
And some people say it's like freedom and, it's just, I love it.
Yeah. It's very different. You can, and I think it might've been like what you saw like in road riding. It's like when you go and ride motorcycles on the road, obviously it's one feeling. In the dirt, in the back country, it's another. But most of us, we drive a vehicle. If you're, driving 9 to 5, to and from work or whatever it is, and you only ride on the weekends, that same exact road is completely different on a motorcycle than it is in the car.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole, like you said, it's a whole nother world. You're in your own headspace. You're somewhere completely different. When it comes to being on the motorcycle itself. So, more people should ride, but
yeah, well, I think if everybody rode, there'd be better drivers as well.
Yeah. Admittedly, my parents, when they, once I started riding and got into adventure bikes, my parents were like, I never really realized how many people, ride those kind of bikes. And now I notice them a lot more, which means I'm paying more attention to motorcyclists.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I'm like, well, yeah, thank you. Because, we all, if you ride a motorcycle, you're going to have a close call. It's just part of it. And it's all about how you, shake it off. But man, that is.
Yeah, totally.
So one of the things, you're doing roll charts now. You're kind of doing this. Have you thought about getting into like something like Baja Rally or Sonora Rally or one of the more, I want to say competitive, but it's still an adventure, even though there is timing. Have you thought about doing something like that?
So the answer is yes, absolutely. About 5 years ago, I heard of the Mexican 1000 Sonora. And I was like, oh God, I've got to do this. And started building a bike and never did enter. And honestly, it would have been a real struggle just financially and et cetera, et cetera. But ended up breaking my knee flat track racing. And ended up having an operation the same week as the Sonora 1000. And ever since then, I've been like, every year, it comes around every year. I'm like, oh man, I still want to do it. I really want to do it. And, I think the long game, and it's come from, I guess, from our own event, I love riding multiple days. And I'm super competitive, always been into sports, played sports, all sorts of sports throughout my childhood and to my early 20s. And so rallying is so the Nora 1000 last year, I was speaking to my wife, I was like, I really want to do the Mexican 1000. And she is super supportive of everything I do. Anybody knows me, I think that's obvious. And she says, well, let's do it. Let's put the money aside and do all that stuff. So we did it, and I entered for this year, and I just deferred my entry a couple of weeks ago to next year because it's just still too up in the air for me. They're not sure about the route. You got to have COVID tests and all that stuff, and I totally understand everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's like if I lived in San Diego, I'd go. Mm-hmm. But because I have to travel across the country and do it, it's a huge time commitment. And I don't want to get there and be test positive for COVID. I've come this far without doing it. I just thought, I'm just going to defer it.
Yeah.
And do it next year, which, it was a tough decision, but at the same time I was like, you've waited this long, just wait and do it right, So, the answer to that is yes. And then, so I've got a Honda XL 600, a 1983 that I was going to ride that on.
Nice.
Which I put the European Dakar tank from the same period on. Basically, it's a 1983 Dakar replica with some better lights.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I was super, and I've done a load of miles on that bike. I built a set of wheels for a guy in trade for it, so I got about $600 in it. But I did 6,000 miles, dual sport miles on it a couple of years ago, just in 1 year, and just love it. I've done all sorts of stuff on it, and so I wanted to do that race on it and built it out the way I wanted it with a gas tank and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to do that next year. But I also committing to that really came from. I watched. Have you heard of Alex Honnold, the rock climber? He He did El Capitan without a rope.
Yes. I knew the name sounded familiar. I remember. Yeah, I remember that.
So he did there's a movie about him doing that, and he talks about committing to doing it essentially. And he'd been thinking about climbing El Capitan free solo for 6 years or something. Mm-hmm. But he committed to it, and he said, I may never ever do it, but if I don't commit to it now, I'll never do it. It's guaranteed I'll never do it. So, he was practicing routes and doing all sorts of stuff and free soloing some of it. And I watched that and I was like, I need to just apply this to the Mexican 1000 so I actually do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I committed to getting fitter. I put the money away. I did, I started building the bike. I did everything I could. And even if I didn't do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm still prepared, Mm-hmm. So now I feel like, Baja is almost a done deal in my mind. I'm going to do it. I want to move on to the next thing. So the next thing for me was to essentially look at my bucket list, which I don't really have one. But the top of the bucket list, if you'd have asked me for the last 10 years, would have been Dakar. Mm-hmm. So essentially my mindset now is, what do I need to do to get to Dakar? Yeah. And so for me, it's a few things. One is fitness. Mm-hmm. Two is riding time, of course, skill level, which I'm reasonably decent. And the third is, of course, you've got the seat time in a bike, but you also need the rally experience. Mm-hmm. You can't just go. I don't physically think you can actually just register for Dakar unless you've done the Sonora or something like that anyway, or the Andalusian rally. You have to do a qualifying rally. I think that's the way it is.
Yeah, they want to know that you know your way around a road book.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and a car, you can just jump in a car and do it. On a bike, they won't let you do it. Mm-hmm. So essentially, what I'd like to do next year, I'm already booked in for the Mexican. I'd like to try and couple that with maybe the Sonora rally, mm-hmm. Or the Baja, and then over the next couple of years, try and get as much proper rally experience on a proper bike, and then focus on, I guess the monetary side of doing Dakar, yeah. Which is huge. But, so for me, the answer is yes, absolutely. I'm a super competitive person by nature, and I love riding bikes. I love the challenge of riding bikes multiple days. Like I say, it's an adventure as well, isn't it? It's even the Dakar to me is the ultimate adventure, especially when you look at the early days.
Mm-hmm. That's what you guys are doing with the Vintage 1000. That's not far from the roots of the Dakar.
It isn't really.
Yeah. So
and that first year was about as catastrophic as our first year. So
yeah. So yeah, and it's in talking, a couple episodes ago, a few episodes ago, and talking to Skylar Howes and his feat.
Yeah.
And with his attempts at the Dakar and the commitment and doing all this stuff. It's like it can be done. You just, you play the right cards and practice and practice and practice. I mean, that's the only thing. It's a very common theme, in this, because it's, I don't know if you ever saw the video with Ricky Brabeck. No, that clip where they say, it's like texting and riding at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's it is. Yeah. It is definitely a challenge, but
it is. But that's really, and I think you said it before on a podcast, that is super enjoyable. The navigation side of it, and I guess that's the other thing that really attracts me to the rally is the navigation, and just from doing the roll charts on the vintage stuff. To me, it's one of the best bits of the ride, and you could do the same thing with a GPS, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as fun. I mean, you probably know yourself that 10 people can go out with the same roll chart, and 5 people will get there with no issues, and the other 5 will get lost in all different places.
Yeah. No, exactly.
And it is what it is. But for me, the reason I know about your podcast is because I saw the guy from Rally Motor Shop, I can't remember his name, was on your podcast, and I follow him because I bought one of his navigation systems for my XL for the Mexican. Mm-hmm. So, Matthew Glade, that's it, yeah. But to me, you definitely need something on the handlebars that scrolls the roll chart at that speed.
Yeah. I kind of, so I had talked to this about, obviously we talked to him about it and having a motorized book, and you guys are doing it with manual advanced roll charts.
Yeah.
My personal, if I ever entered a rally, it wouldn't be to be competitive. It would be just simply for the adventure. Yeah. And do you really need motorized advance? Could you get away with, knowing if, hey, I'm not here to be competitive. I'm just here to say I completed and I didn't get too lost, Yeah. So, I mean, it's.
No, I think you totally could. I mean, even the Mexican 1000, if I wasn't going to want to win it, which I will.
Because I was going to say, is being competitive, we're not on the same wavelength there.
It's just in my nature that I will, not want to be last. So if it wasn't for that, you could totally do a manual thing, and the cost difference is, $1,000 at least.
Yes.
So, and it can be mounted to any bike as well. So that was the beauty of the Mexican for me. It's just like, this will be a great adventure. And then, as the years have gone on, I'm just like, I'd love to go and actually really perform well on it. Mm-hmm. But to get into rallies and roll charts, I mean, it's really, even if you do it properly with a proper tower and stuff, it's not that expensive. Compared to other motorsports, I mean, it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, true. And it's different. Even if you did, you go all in, you get the tower, you get everything, and you go. So the bikes generally, I feel like last longer because you're not beating them up. It's not the sprint race that it is everywhere else. And, I feel like the equipment, it's not as hard on the equipment. Lengthwise, I mean, if you run a full season of Baja, you're putting 3,000 miles on a bike at race speeds. Where if you're going to do a rally, as long as it's not the Dakar, you're going to put whatever it is. It's 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles or whatever it is, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So it's an investment, but I think it's. I feel like it's the future as far as when it comes to competitive events. Eventually, the BLM out here, Bureau of Land Management, is going to get tired of allowing permits for sprint races and stuff like that, and they're going to have to figure out another way of doing it. And unfortunately,
that's probably inevitable. And you're the other thing about rally is that, like, compared to something like motocross, where you are probably wringing the bike's neck for 20 minutes at a time, most people aren't good enough to wring a rally bike's neck.
Yeah.
for that long. I mean, I'm not. That's for sure. Especially a modern 450, or God forbid, like a KTM rally bike or something like that. I mean, wow.
Yeah. What
You
I
know,
mean, the hell that those bikes have to go through.
It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you see them. I mean, if you've ever seen any of the top 10 riders, top 15 riders at Dakar, they're not concerned with wringing the bike's neck at all.
No.
I mean, they're in it. But for the most, like the most part, with Skylar, like he was talking about, one of the team members on the BAS Dakar team, he's just there to finish, and just, was the last one into the bivouac every night and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to be a lot less harder on the equipment to a certain extent, because, if you've ridden bikes for a while, sometimes that hitting the brakes isn't the best thing. Sometimes you do need to get on it, but I guess in summary of it is that there's such a broad range in rally. You don't have to be a sprint racer if you want to go out and have fun. Some of these Baja races are absolutely torture if you don't like. They're just so rough and beat up and just absolutely over the top that if you're just somebody that wants to go trail ride the thing and go and hang out, you're just going to be miserable the entire day.
Yeah, I think it's totally different. It's a totally different attitude, isn't it? Like, I feel like, especially, it seems like, and I've been following Dakar for a number of years now, but everybody that you ask who races that, they just want to finish primarily. Number one goal is to finish. And then secondary, it's what place you come in, right? So, whereas I feel like Baja, it's just all out, go for it. And like you say, I feel like, and we went and watched the Baja a couple of years ago, which was another step on, like, it was like, okay, if I want to race down there, maybe I should actually go there,
Mm-hmm.
So we did. We went and we watched the race, and it was great. But I'm sure they're running the same roads most of the time, so those roads are probably just rutted and just, oh man, I think we were at mile 160 or something, or just on the coast there, and God, some of the cars that came through were just ruined already.
Yeah. They, when they open for pre, so that's, the one main thing, or one of the big things is that with those races is, you have pre-running, so it's open for practice a week.
Yeah.
Now lately it's a week before, or 2 weeks before, and the guys that go and practice will do 3, 4, 5 laps in a vehicle that's about 75% as capable as their actual race trucks and race cars. So it gets beat up for 2 weeks, and then now you've got the race, and now it's even more beat up by the time you get there if you're in the lower classes, or if you're falling behind, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So like this, I mean, and anybody like there's an acronym for SCORE, same clapped out road every time, and I mean, it's, I hate to say it, but it's true. But there's only also so many roads that you can go, and then land use permits and all of this stuff that you've got to go through to legally be able to put on an event. It does kind of limit it. So.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that, like this, I mean, could you literally organize a Baja style race on the roads that you're doing on the Vintage 1000 or the 500? I mean, I don't think so, right? I mean, these are like kind of public roads.
They're all public roads.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I started looking into it, I was like, I don't want to even start getting into talking to landowners or anything like that. So it's all public roadway, and it's usually kind of 70%, 60 to 70% off-road, or dirt roads, gravel roads, or whatever. And it's funny because they change from year in, year out, because, some years they'll go in and regrade them, and it's like, oh, this road used to be awesome, and now it's just a really nice gravel road, and then there's other roads that just every year just get worse and worse and worse, and it's just like, oh, I can't wait to go next year, and see what it's like. And you turn up and it's just they've regraded it. But you know, it would be awesome to run some kind of race around here. But
well, I really like what you're doing, though. I mean, I think that that's kind of the way to grow it and do it. And I've been toying with that idea out here. It's like, well, there's all these adventure bikes. There's all these things out, you know, and pretty much you need a license plate out here if you want to go anywhere in the dirt, which is completely weird. But, you know, I think you got the recipe, you know, and especially if it's been successful with the pre-80 bikes, you know, maybe it's going to the 90s or something like that, or, you know, nothing newer than a 90 or 80s, 89 and a half. Well, I don't know.
And, you know, when I kind of reached out to you, I kind of got the gist from what you've been saying, that you were interested in trying to do that kind of stuff. And I guess when I reached out, I wasn't really necessarily saying, hey, do you want me to come on the podcast? It was more of I'd like to talk to you about what you are thinking in that regard. Because I've been thinking the same kind of thing. And it's like, and I think you've definitely touched on it a few times. It's like, you can ride a road 100 times. You know, you can ride a route 100 times, and then if you roll chart it or road book it and then follow it, it's totally different.
Yeah.
It's a totally different experience. And I've been toying with the idea of, you know, just doing some road book rallies. You know, not timed or anything, but everybody can go out on their own or whatever and just follow the road book. And there's a destination at the end of the day, and whether it's a campground or whatever, I don't know, but, you know, kind of run it the same way we do it, but it's just open to anybody. And I think it would be a good event. It's hard to know because I don't actually know that many people that ride modern dual sport stuff. You know, me and a few friends do, but, you know, to me, it'd be great if you had a 5-day event where, even if we just ran the exact same route as our like Smoky Mountains Vintage 1000, you'd still spend 8 days in the saddle. 8 hours, sorry, not 8 days, a day probably anyway, especially if you stopped and like, hey, this is a nice area, let's stop, and there's a huge overview or whatever, let's stop and take a minute or whatever, you know, you'd still have a nice full day of riding, and it would be a great adventure because most of the people haven't ridden, even if they ride around here for the last 10 years, they wouldn't have ridden all the roads I'm mapping out.
Yeah.
And even the weather changes, some of them, you know, if it's raining, it's a totally different experience. Turns a 20-minute road into a 3-hour road. And honestly, that wouldn't matter what, you know, we had a clay hill climb that was probably, man, I don't know, maybe quarter of a mile long. And when I pre-ride, so I develop the route and then I pre-ride it, make sure it's good. And, you know, there's still 1 or 2 mistakes in 1,000 miles, but when I pre-rode it, it was like today, it was, you know, sunshine, and I just rode straight up this hill, didn't even think about it. Had a few ruts in it, and I remember in my mind thinking, oh, there's a few deep ruts in that, and they were kind of crisscrossing a little bit. Thought, oh, some people will find that a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
And I was with the last group, of course, and it ended up being 2 groups together because the last group caught up another group, and they broke down. We just stopped and fixed it. It was the last afternoon. As we leave where we're broken down, we're probably about 5 miles away from this hill. It started raining. And you guys don't have much clay out there, I don't think, but wet clay is interesting.
Yes.
Especially when it's a quarter mile long hill with ruts in it. It literally took 3 hours to get 10 guys up it. I'm talking like 5 people pushed on a bike, barely being able to stand up on the hill. It was so slick.
Yeah.
Just carnage. And just going back to the guys that come on this ride, man, just fantastic. Nobody, you know, there's a lot of very tired people, me included, after 5 days of riding. You see the fatigue on people's face after a couple of days.
Oh, yeah.
And the 5 days of riding, you're on this hill for 3 hours, and nobody lost their cool. Everybody mucked in. Everybody was covered head to toe in clay from spinning wheels, and everybody was just having a smile on their face, and it was just fantastic. And we finally got off the dirt, and we're 50 miles from Chattanooga. We stopped at a gas station. I said to everybody, it was just, that was an amazing experience, and it was really amazing because of you guys. I mean, just fabulous attitude, and just fantastic. And to me, everybody that went through 10 minutes before or an hour before and it was dry, totally missed out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just feel like there is room for it. I just don't know if we're ready to do a modern bike event.
Yeah. And how, because I mean, in talking to Matthew Glade, like it's growing. And there's more people looking at road books, and there's more interest there. But I don't know. Is it growing and people are getting interested and then being turned off because there's not other people doing it, or because there's not events and ways to practice or things to do? It's kind of. I know there's some people that want it easy. They just give me a GPS track, I'll follow that, and we're good to go. But I think there are a lot of people that enjoy the challenge of hey, we're going to ride this road book. LA Barstow to Vegas. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. I've done it. I've done it a couple of times.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, because so they also do. You can also get a roll chart for that.
Yeah, we do it for the roll chart.
Yeah, perfect. So there's there are people that are up for it, but it's like, okay, how do we get together? How do we figure out, get that resource for like, hey, if you're looking for roll charts, road books in this area, this is who you need to contact, or this is where you can find them, or where you can do this kind of stuff. So I feel like that's still the missing link of people.
We get, it's difficult. This is, if you contacted Barstow, the guys that organise Barstow Vegas, they might have the same answer as I do. And it's people contact me if they can buy the roll charts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say no. And the reason is that people pay me to do those roll charts, and they pay for the experience. And just with the internet the way it is, I would hate for that roll chart or that thing to go on to Adventure Rider or somewhere similar.
Yeah. And
then there was just everybody doing it. I feel like it kind of, in a way, it could potentially water down what we have.
I totally sorry. Cut in there.
Yeah.
I understand that. So there's a big thing down here in Baja is that you've got a bunch of tour companies that are bringing masses of people into Baja.
Yeah.
And they're riding and tearing up all of these roads and doing all this stuff and causing dangerous situations. And then they leave, and then they leave. And, at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a person, and there's not a whole lot of money left for the local community that could be, that's in need of that. So part of it, originally when I had started the Chasing Waypoints thing is like, hey, I am going to put out these routes that these guys are taking so people can do them, but not have to pay these people. And then that way the money trickle down and, where to stop and the places to see, almost kind of like what Backcountry Discovery Routes does.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. There's that fine line. It's like, well, wait, do we really want to be a part of this that could potentially ruin it? Because of course there's always going to be people that, turn it into a racetrack or, they're abusive of this kind of stuff. And it's like,
Yeah, and we're like, we say it every year. We have a pre-ride meeting, and usually something every morning before everybody leaves as well. We're always like, it's amazing. You're in the middle of the Smoky Mountains, in the middle of nowhere, and there's a house. and it's somebody's house, you know, and they live there every day. It's not just a weekender. And they've got a dog, and that dog's not leashed because they're in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, I'm always like, if you see a mailbox or if you see anything that even looks remotely like there is some kind of civilization there, slow down. And, you know, be respectful. You're going through, you know, you'll find clusters of 3-4 houses on some of these dirt roads. Slow down, 10, 15, you know, miles an hour, just kind of cruise through. Make sure you're not kicking up dust and all that kind of stuff. And just, and because we're on old bikes, you know, we're not the quietest group, in all honesty. And, you know, I just want to make sure that we're not, you know, irritating people and being disrespectful and all that kind of stuff. Even at the campgrounds, you know, we're at, you know, idle in and idle out and all that kind of stuff. And I just feel like you were saying, you know, there's that potential if it gets out there and then people start staying at the same places we were at and stuff, it then becomes associated. And if it's negative, it really just doesn't do any good. And to be honest, you can go on Adventure Rider and find a GPS route that's not my route, but it'd still be a great route in the same area, you know? And that's another thing. I've been very conscious not to use anybody else's stuff. You know, I don't even look at it. I just go and I look around and figure it out. Just so I don't want to be using somebody's, what I see as intellectual property in a way. And if I was just doing it with some friends on a weekend, that's one thing. But if I'm, you know, making some money out of it, that's something totally different to me. But yeah, it's really difficult because I'd love more people to get into it for sure. But
yeah, how do you?
I don't know.
It's that. How do you do it in such a way where more people get into it, but at the same time you're not causing that. I mean, and that was one of the things, like with my time at Baja Rally was, you know, there was no GPSs allowed, and because of the same thing, because then the routes would get copied. Then now all you got to do, and it could just be in a bag, and it's just tracking the route that you're following. And then later on that gets into trouble. And then in the end, you know, we were collecting road books and making sure that the road books were kept, that the competitors didn't keep them for that reason. It's like, hey, well, but it's because there is land use permits. There's permits from the ranchers, from the local township and all of that. So you have to respect that part of it, which in translating into what you're doing with the local roads and stuff like that, it could make it a lot more, the potential for it to get out of hand is a lot, because it's a public road, and that'll be the first line of defense for some of these people riding. It's like, well, it's a public road. So I don't know. I think in that case is the way is like what you're already doing. It's just, if we could get more events that are road book oriented like this, no timing, is just straight up a road book. You're just going to navigate this stuff, and bonus points if you can find the bivouac before 6 p.m. You know,
there's a free beer waiting for you if you get there.
Exactly,
you know, There's a free beer waiting for you if you get there at 11:30 as well, but that doesn't really matter.
You gotta time it right. Yeah, it's an open bar if you're there between 6:30 and 6:35, and then again at 11 to 11:35.
Exactly. But you know, I think just with our events, we don't charge. I mean, we charge $650, and you get your food and drink and everything for that. Roll chart, support, everything, campgrounds. You know, you put gas in your bike. If you have no issues, all you do is pay for gas. And I think that's pretty reasonable. And so we're not like, it's not a full-time business for us. It earns us a little bit of money, which is awesome, because it's great to earn money doing what you love doing. But we also want to keep it accessible to people, and I think people do appreciate that, you know. And even if we did a modern bike event, it wouldn't be, you know, because of course, unlike anybody, you look at ways that you could make money doing the things you love doing, right? And you look at some of the tour companies, like you mentioned the Baja ones, but there's plenty that do Colorado and wherever, and they're thousands of dollars for a 4-7 day trip. And I think it's worth the money. But would I ever want to charge it? No. Because it limits it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I'm kind of worried about with the modern bike stuff is does the clientele change?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Is it, and I don't want to single out people on BMW GSs, but they're $20,000. And their gear, most of the people you see riding those bikes, their gear is worth more than the bike. So a lot of these guys are riding. And is the attitude different? Do they expect more from the event? Do you know what I mean? Are they, is the beer 2 degrees warmer than they wanted it to be? you know what I mean? It's just like, like somebody handed it to you, just that worries Jamie and I a lot. It's like, if we branch out into modern bike stuff, does it change the feel of the event? And then does that totally change the feel of it for us?
Yeah. Does it turn it into more of a work than a passion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear it. I mean, yeah, if the Starbucks is too far away, that could lead to problems. So I hate to harp on it, but I've got a BMW in the garage, and they're all walks of lives, but there's just so many people. There's such a diverse group that ride BMWs, and for the most part, everybody's pretty cool. After working, putting in a few years at the shop, I can tell you everybody's pretty cool. But yeah, there are some people that, I love this bike. I love the way it looks. No, I'm not going to ride it in the dirt. And then there's the guys that are trying to ride it up the side of this mountain. And I'm going, they make 2-strokes with trial bike tires for that, right? It's like, so there's a whole spectrum. But yeah, of course, you're right. It's the concern is, okay, well, as the group grows, vintage bike guys are going to be, I would feel like, are going to be more inclined to the do-it-yourself. I'm going to make $2 out of a penny. I'm really going to try and be as efficient and effective with the minimal things that I have for this bike. Because it's not like you can walk, down to the corner store and find a brand new one of these.
Exactly. Or anything for it at all. I mean, it's not like the Suzuki dealer stocks anything for that bike, or Honda, they might have a bolt for it.
Yeah, the first thing out of their mouth, I'm sure, is, wait, you still own one of those?
Yeah.
I thought they crushed all those.
So, it's, I don't know, but there's another part of me that's like, I know people, and I did a post on it on Instagram last week, I think. I was just like, who thinks we should do a modern bike ride? And I think it was like 80-something% of people that responded, and there's quite a few people who said, yes, we should do. And most of those are people that have got a more modern bike that want to do it. So you kind of feel like, man, it is a really fun time, and you want to share that. I want to share that fun time with people. I just like I say, I don't know if we're ready. And then even then, it's like, we're limited to a fairly small number of people. But do you open it up to more people? We've opened it up to 5 more people this year, and it's either going to work or it isn't. And you think, it's only 5 people, or but that's another group on the road that could be having problems. It could be another hour on the road for me every day. It's another 5 mouths to feed, because we have a friend. Well, we used to have a friend that owns a couple of restaurants in town that used to come and cook for everybody. The first couple of years, it was just we'd figure something out, and since then we kind of got more organised, and we have a friend that's now he's now a friend, but he was a friend of the other guy that had to stop doing it, who used to be a chef, and now he comes and cooks for everybody. So, you know, it's a really good meal when you get into camp and all that kind of stuff. But it's also, you know, another 5 mouths for him to feed. Yeah. And you almost feel like if you open up to modern bikes, you could easily do more people because there should be less trouble, right, on the road. But who knows? It's such a... Yeah. It could be even worse. You know?
Yeah,
no
exactly.
idea.
Yeah. Well, like anything, maybe it's one of those, you can do it once. It goes well, great. If it doesn't, you know, well, cool. We did it once. We crossed it off the list. We tried it, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So who knows? Yeah,
I mean, so if, you know, I guess, you know, I'd love to speak to you a bit more about maybe trying to do something, or if you want to do something out west, I'd love to get involved.
Yeah, we can. We definitely want to chat offline on that one. Don't want to put the plans out into the world, you know.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I love doing this stuff, and any way I can get involved with anything. You know.
I absolutely. Well, yeah, and this is awesome. Like I'm gonna love hyping this up because, you know, there's a lot of guys out here with, you know, that have those vintage bikes hanging around and hanging out in corners. And, you know, I'm thinking I've already got one buddy of mine that I know he was one of the techs at BMW, and he's got a couple bikes in his stuffed away in his garage. And then I think he's got some stuff still back out east where he was from in Arkansas.
Huh.
So I'm thinking like, I think I might have somebody, you know, already for you. And because I just think it's just such a pure event in what you're doing. And with this road book thing and having the roll charts and just kind of keeping it really basic and simple. So yeah, I think we definitely, we're going to have an offline chat for sure.
Yeah. Don't, if you want to buy a vintage bike, get the lightest thing you can.
The lightest thing?
Yeah. The light. Yeah. Like, don't do it on a BMW.
And so the one that I'm seeing here that's got the guy, looks like he's on a Triumph on the Instagram. Maybe not something like that.
What color? Well, I don't know. I ride a Triumph, so I'm going to say, yeah, get a Triumph. So, to me, it's everybody, the ride coming up in Utah, I think there's something like 12 or 14 are all 500cc singles. Cool. And they're either Honda XLs or XT500 Yamahas. And, you know, and they kind of, I guess they started making the XT in 76, I think. So they're all from that kind of 76 to 80 age range. And they're really actually pretty good bikes, and, you know, can keep up with modern bikes for the right rider.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, there's still got a friend of mine, Thomas, who, that's the other thing about this ride. I've got so many friends that I didn't even know before the ride. But Thomas rides a BMW. I think it's 1,000cc. I don't think it was originally, but it's 1,000cc BMW, and it's heavy. And I rode it for a little bit on one of the events the other year, and it was just terrible. Yeah. It was just like, I mean, all the weight's down low, of course, but, you know, if you could, there's a guy that also does it on a 2-stroke Penton, which Penton, I don't know if you know the Penton history, but essentially they became, John Penton ended up helping KTM. Okay. Essentially, Pentons became KTMs. As American guy.
I did not know that.
And he does it. Yeah, John Penton, his name is. And this guy that comes on a ride, him and his twin brother, who are, they're, I think they're in the late 50s, maybe early 60s. I'm not too sure. They ride from Ohio to Chattanooga, do the ride, and then ride back.
Nice.
And Rick has done it on a 125 Penton 2-stroke. I mean,
it sounds like a really long day.
phenomenal. But the thing's turning 10,000 RPM at like 65 miles an hour, and it'll do it. It will literally do it all day.
That's crazy.
But Rick's a special guy. He's worked on Porsche engines most of his adult life and stuff. His preparation is second to none. But but when he's in the dirt, that's the perfect bike for it. But when you're on the highway, you just look across and just think, he must be miserable, And we don't really go on highways, But there's times when we are, like the closest place to camp that's got, a toilet. We have to jump on the highway for 10 miles or something, I say highway, but 55 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But still, you're just like, oh, God, that must be terrible. It's bad enough on a 650 Triumph.
Yeah. And that thing, I'm sure, sounds like it's 200 RPM away from full C's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds like I guess, one of those murder hornets that they're talking about.
But it makes the rounds. Hey, whatever.
Oh, man, it does it. It does it. So, yeah.
Nice.
Incredible. But, yeah,
Go ahead.
I don't know what I was going to say.
Nice. Well, yeah. So we'll definitely. I'll give you a call maybe in the week, and we'll talk a little bit more about the events and stuff like that, and what you're doing. And I'll get so the best website. So I've got your Instagram already for Vintage 1000. So I'll put that link in the description, and then also the speeddeluxe.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Speed Deluxe is my vintage bike company, but the website doubles as there's the events website, and all of our events this year are sold out.
Sounds like a horrible problem. No.
Yeah, it's terrible. And but if anybody is interested, shoot us an email or a message and just get on our mailing list, because especially the Eastern route, it sells out really quick. Nice. People are giving us deposits on the last day of the ride for next year. So yeah, if you're interested, try and get in early. And say the western route next year will be in Arizona in May.
Okay.
Around about the same time as we're doing Utah this year. Cool. And we do have the 500 event, which we just, we did the 500 for the last 2 years, and that was really just to cater. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just to cater for people that can't get away for a full week. We had a lot of requests for it, so we decided, let's do it.
Yeah, that's a great. I think that's a good for a small event, 500 miles. I mean, that's 3 solid days of riding for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that. Nice.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, I appreciate you taking time and introducing us this whole thing, and then I'm excited. I think we can do some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it's like I say, I'd love for you to come on one of the events, and maybe we can get together and do some modern stuff as well, and figure something out, and just promote the road books and that kind of stuff, because I feel like it's, like you say, it's probably the way forward in terms of just enjoyability and just riding. It's just fantastic. So, like I say, anything I can do to promote it, and maybe do some more events, and great. It'd be great to talk about it offline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely up for it. I mean, I know that'll more people will get interested. As long as we can continue to put more resources out there, more road books, more things where they can, where there's something to do. I was like, hey, great, I spent $1,000 on this navigation equipment, but I don't know what to do with it. So totally. Yeah.
I mean, and the other great thing about road book stuff is that if it's not a race, not everybody's competitive, so it makes it totally different. It makes a non-competitive ride a lot more fun.
Yeah.
But still, it gives you it also gives you something to talk about at the camp every night as well. I'm sure you've seen that, where people, even if you've mentioned doing roll charts between friends and just riding a friend's roll chart and talking about, well, how did I get ahead of you when you were ahead of me, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It just enhances the ride to me. So
yeah, absolutely,
all about it.
Yep, same here. Well, sweet. Well, thank you very much for coming and taking the time, and I'll give you a call in the week, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, see if we can come up with something.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It's kind of been fun talking about the event and just looking back a little bit on it.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah. The beginnings.
Yeah. The beginning. Yeah.
Nice. All right, Adam. Well, I know you're on the East Coast, so you have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, you too. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. So that was pretty interesting. So got a chance to talk. That was Adam from Speed Deluxe. He's got his shop in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they do a couple of events, vintage bikes, so pre-80s, and very, very interesting. It's cool. I'm happy to see that we've got the vintage bike thing going down. Now I'm like, wow, you could build something and, it could be, just complete barn find and actually go ride in and do that kind of stuff. And I'm definitely up for the Flagstaff and Utah one. That's a little closer to home. I've ridden a little bit or driven around the area in Flagstaff. And for those that have done that, that it's very, very picturesque and really, really nice out there. So definitely worth it. So that is going to be a wrap for this week's episode. I am going to put the links to Adam's website on the description of the podcast and also his Instagram. So if you guys want to look up and see a little bit more, they got a lot of really, really cool pictures on their Instagram page. Definitely going to want to check that out. And then also take a look at the website. But if you like the podcast, you like what you heard, you've got a suggestion, maybe you want to come on, you got something going on with road books or something with motorcycles, or just generally getting lost in the middle of nowhere, we want to hear about it. So don't forget, like, subscribe if you like the podcast. You can find us on Facebook under Chasing Waypoints, Instagram at Chasing Waypoints _official, YouTube and I already said Facebook, but YouTube, same thing, Chasing Waypoints. And again, any ideas, any of that kind of stuff, we'd be happy to have you on. Next week, we are going to have Jacob Argybright on the show. We're going to be talking a little bit about his rally training and what he has been doing. He is also he is kind of starting from zero. He's got some road book experience, but now is expanding and going a little bit more into it. So excited to talk to him. Actually going to be talking to him tomorrow, but you guys won't get to hear it until next week. We're going to talk a little bit, and so absolutely stoked. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. Don't forget, like, subscribe, share. I'm going to post this on Facebook, so you guys can comment on it on Facebook if there's questions or anything like that, or you want to get in touch. I'm sure Adam will be on there as well, and he can answer any of the questions that you may have. So, all right, that is a wrap. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.